Life Audio.
Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, your authority in navigating the world of homeschooling diverse learners. Featuring Peggy Ployer from SPED Homeschool, Annie Yorty from AnnieYorty.com, Leilani Melendez from Living with Eve, Stephanie Buckwalter from eLARP Learning, and Dawn Jackson from Dawn Jackson Educational Consulting and Tutoring. With over 75 years of combined homeschooling expertise, experiences, and perspectives, this group is eager to share their wealth of wisdom to empower your homeschooling journey. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get ready for insightful discussions, valuable insights, and practical tips as these experts and their guests dive into the hottest topics in homeschooling. Whether you're a seasoned homeschooler, just considering this path, or anywhere in between, you don't want to miss a minute of these enlightening conversations that will empower your child to thrive in their homeschool environment. Empowering Homeschool Conversations is starting right now. Join us to give your homeschool the power boost it needs to successfully educate the unique learners in your home.
My name is Stephanie Buckwalter, and this is Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Today, our topic is Looking Ahead, Exploring Independence for Young Adults. Our guest is Mary Underwood of What Empty Nest. Mary Underwood has been involved with the special needs community for over a decade, as well as having friends and family who are walking this journey with their young adult. She's an author and blogger at What Empty Nest, where her mission is to encourage, equip, and empower parents of young adults with disabilities who are entering adulthood. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hi. So let's get started. I'll let y'all know, Mary is a person, I know her in real life, so she's a personal friend, and I've observed up close her work that she's doing. So this is really exciting for me to be able to interview her so that she can share her information and her wisdom with us. So let's start with, how did you get into working with special needs young adults?
Well, it really started at my church about 15 years ago when my youngest daughter was on staff, and she was actually running their access program, and she needed volunteers. And she asked me, she said, "Mom, could you volunteer on Sundays?" And so, being that kind of mom, I said, "Sure, I can do that for a little while," and ended up in there for over 10 years and just really enjoyed it. And now most of those kids that I had in church are young adults. And so I'm still connected to most of their moms, including Stephanie, and just see these kids as they've gone through life. And it's just been kind of exciting to keep going with that.
That's funny. Your daughter is a very good recruiter, because another person who was at a respite retreat for special needs parents said that your daughter came up to her and said, "Hey, do you want to work in the special needs ministry?" And she's like, "Well, I don't think I'm qualified," thinking she was going to get out of it.
Yeah.
And she said, "You only need two things." She goes, "Love God, love others." And she's like, "Oh." And then she ended up working in the ministry for many, many years. So your daughter's a very good recruiter, apparently.
She is. She can talk anybody into anything, pretty much. So,
yes. And a bonus, Mary's daughter is also just got her doctorate and as an occupational therapist. So it's so her family's really serving our community, and I appreciate that. So, what is your definition of independence when we're talking about these special needs young adults?
Well, my definition of independence is not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. The interesting thing was, back in the spring, I was doing a seminar. And the first night of the seminar, I was speaking to young adults on the autism spectrum. And I asked them the question, when you think about being independent, what is one word that comes to mind? And all of these kids were between the age of 20 and 25, I think was kind of the rough framework. And to a kid, they all said freedom. And so we talked a little bit about freedom from what does freedom mean? And we had a very good discussion about that. And then, of course, we fleshed it out a little bit more. And then the next day was the parents' turn to meet with the parents and speak to them. And so I asked them the same question. I didn't tell them that I had already asked their children. I just said, so when you think about independence, what is the first word that comes to your mind? And all the parents said, freedom. And so we all have this idea that being independent means I can be free from something. And so for myself, I think that kind of how I instruct the young adults is, what is it that you want freedom from? Do you want freedom from boredom? Do you want freedom from mom and dad? Do you want freedom from the same old routine? What is it that you would like to have some independence from? And most kids can articulate what they mean by freedom, what it is that they would like to be free from. And so what I encourage them to do is to take that word freedom and just keep putting words to it so that they can kind of get a picture for what it is they're looking for when they're talking about independence. I also tell them that independence does not have to mean that you have your own apartment and you live all by yourself. Sure, that's an option, but it doesn't have to mean that. You can be independent at home. And that's, I believe, the first place that we need to start at for kids that have different disabilities or special needs is, how can I be independent while I'm at home? And so that's kind of the focus of what I do.
I'm curious, what kind of things did they say they wanted to be free from?
Some of them wanted to be, boredom was a big thing. Others, their parents was another thing. And we talked about that. We talked about, well, what is it about your parents that you want to be free from? Don't you still want them to be connected to your life? Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I want to be able to make decisions. I want to be able to decide what I'm going to do and when I'm going to get up and when I'm going to, what I'm going to eat. I just want to be able to make decisions. And so we just, talked about different things like that. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what some of the other ones were. But what I wanted to try to have them see was, you can be independent and still reliant on others. We all need a support system. And let's face it, your mom and dad are going to be your biggest cheerleaders and your biggest support system. So how do you take that desire to be your own person, to be autonomous, but still use this great resource that you have, which is your parents?
We will continue this conversation after a short break.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
Now, what about if a parent is afraid that once their child is out on their own, that they will cut them off, and then they won't, just that they'll, that the child will cut off all communication, won't answer text, won't answer phone calls, won't answer the door, even though, you just mentioned that the parents are going to probably be their biggest support, the foundation of their support structure. What do you tell parents who are afraid that might happen? Like, what are the chances? Or do you have any idea?
Well, I haven't actually ever seen that. I think all of us, even with typical kids, worry that our relationship is going to change drastically and that our kids aren't going to want to hear from us and be a part of their lives. I don't think that's what actually ends up happening in most cases. But I think as parents, if you really believe that, you need to stop and examine, why do I think that? And is there something I need to change so that that doesn't happen? I think typically that's going to happen more likely, and this is just my thinking, to the parent that has the iron grip on their child, and basically that young adult doesn't have any say for themselves. That's going to be where the rebellion comes in with, well, now I'm on my own. I don't need you anymore. And we have that. But I think that as you prepare for independence, that's one thing the parent probably needs to work on, is the letting go, and letting go in the way where the child is still safe. The child knows that home is where one of their biggest support systems is. And there's just a really good dialogue between the two of you.
That's really good. And that's helpful, because when I was asking the question, I was thinking of a particular family where the child had mental issues and they were afraid that the paranoia would kick in. And I guess that's a completely different topic, is, the working through mental issues in this process. But I do know what you said is true, because we just had a son who went to college and he kind of did the cutoff thing, not completely. He couldn't do that because we were helping him with school, but he did. There was definitely for him, it wasn't really a rebellion, but it was a definite distancing and then having to reset the boundaries.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the process of letting go. And it's so hard with our special needs kids.
Yes.
To do that.
It is, because it's a sort of, you want to let go, but then you have to pull back because you think, well, what if someone's going to take advantage of them? Or what if they don't remember what it is they're supposed to do? Or what if, and that's typical. And that's also something that parents of typical children struggle with, just knowing that, talking to my friends and so forth. I had to let my son wanted to join the Army in the worst way. And I didn't want him to join the Army because I thought it was dangerous. And so we actually started, and we couldn't talk about it together because we would just blow up. And so we started kind of a little writing dialogue back and forth. And I would ask him questions and then he would answer them. And those are now some of the sweetest papers that I have with his, well, here's 10 reasons why I think this is a good idea. And he did eventually go. And of course, his first thing was off to Djibouti, Africa. And I was like, I told you so, as parents are wont to do. But, he grew in all kinds of ways that he needed to grow. And I think that is going to be the same for young adults with disabilities. They just have more struggle for the most part, and they have more obstacles that they have to learn how to go. And so that's where we start with the journey of independence, as we start with helping them to become as independent as possible while they're still at home, just kind of letting the door open a little wider, a little wider, a little wider.
See, I guess that's the difference. But I guess there's a point if they move out of the house, because at home you can do the little wider thing. But like when my son went off to college, it was all of a sudden it went from, instead of, there we go, doing this, it was from this to this. And then this went back and forth until we found where the new boundaries were. And I think that's the hardest part to think about is, at home we have that control, which is what they're saying they don't like. Those were good things, by the way. That was really good insight for me as a parent to see what's going to, what they might be thinking if they don't have the capacity to explain things as well as some of the more open kids. That was very helpful. So I know one of the phrases you like to use in your materials is maximum independence, and you just referenced having the most independence possible. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by maximum independence?
Maximum independence to me is the goal. Now, you may have a young adult with a disability that lives at home and think that they're independent because they have their personal care. They know how to do that. They know how to do their laundry. They can cook up a snack. So they're quote unquote independent. But is that the maximum independence that they could have? Maybe there's just a little more. What's the next step? And then after that, what's the next step after that? And that's how we teach and build life skills, really functional life skills is, first we teach them how to make a snack. Next, we teach them how to cook with ingredients that we've provided for them. Then we teach them do you know how to grocery shop? Let's read this recipe and see what it needs. And you just go a little further and a little further. And maximum independence to me is where they are then able to survive on their own. The possibility of them going out on their own is there, where you have a much more comfortable feeling or basis for that kind of a decision. They're more comfortable and have jumped through a lot of hoops to get to where they're at. So maximum just means that we've taken it a step further. And, probably with all of us, we would say, I am at my maximum independence right now, but I probably could figure out how to be a little more independent,
Yeah, that's good. And then how do you balance that with, I was going to say balance that with community, but I'll hold off on that question right now because I think that's going to take us in a different direction. And I want to stay focused on your independence thing because it's so good. Okay. Now, on a case like that where you have, if the parent is really far behind in this independence, the child really wants to be independent, but they really don't have a lot of those life skills, executive function skills, independent skills that they need, where does a person start? Like, how do they figure out where to start?
Well, I have a parent's guide that I have developed. It's called Do You Dream of Independence? Oops, got to go this way. Do You Dream of Independence? And basically, in this little free guide that you can get on my website, we ask some questions. We ask the question, why, what, and how. So, and both the parent and the young adult are answering these questions. So the first question, and there's worksheets in here to do this. The first question with why is asking your child, why do you want to be independent? And they might have, a list of reasons, like we were talking about, freedom. Well, freedom from what? And you just keep exploring this why until you kind of get to the bottom of what they're thinking independence means. But mom and dad have to do the exercise also. Why do I want my young adult to have independence, or why don't I want my young adult to have independence? And just really explore this why. And then we can move into the what. What does independence mean for our family, for our specific situation? Again, looking at the big picture, and there's no right or wrong answer for your particular situation. Now, one person may have a child that really lacks in social skills, and so they're concerned about them being out there on their own. So what does independence look like for that child? Well, independence is going to look a whole lot easier if we work on developing some social skills. And so that might be a route that they start working on to get towards readiness. And then the same question then has to be asked of the young adult with the what is, what would be the benefits and what would be the drawbacks of being independent? And what do you see as your strengths? What do you see as your weaknesses? You have to sit down and you have to put this whole picture out, because there's not one solid answer that works for every single child. And then the how, there's a lot of different ways to do this. A lot of kids with disabilities stay in the school system till they're 21 and they gain some of that functional life skill training. Some of them don't, and they go into jobs. Some of them have a really hard time finding or qualifying for jobs. So maybe jobs is something that has to be, worked on for a while. And the parents that I work with, we sit down and we talk about, okay, what would a 5-year plan look like? This isn't something that's going to happen overnight, or, next month you can get your own apartment. This is not what
that's good to know.
We're talking about a 5-year plan. And if your child's disability is perhaps, maybe they're more mild as opposed to, moderate or severe, you might be able to put into a 3-year plan. It really just depends on where your child is. So the first step then, after asking these questions, the next step then is asking the who question. Am I really the person that should be working with my child? And I've had parents tell me, I am not the person that should be doing this with my child. And I see you laughing. So if you're not the person to work with them, then who is? And so then we explore that. What programs are out there? What curriculum is there? How could we work this to make work for my child? So once you've asked those important questions and you've kind of gotten it in place for your specific need, your specific family, then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do what I call cast the vision. Okay, we are going to work towards X. Maybe that's more independence at home. Maybe that's we're going to find a group setting or a roommate or, you name it. Or maybe you're working towards, I really want my own apartment. And you understand or you agree that your young person is capable of that with some skill building. So we've cast the vision. And then the next step really is to prepare a timeline. And that's where the 3 years or the 5 years.
We will continue this conversation after a short break.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
I have a question about your first step. What was the exact step again? What's it called? How did you name it?
Cast the vision.
Okay. So when they're casting the vision, how involved is the parent in helping them cast the vision?
At this point, the parent's very involved. They're asking the questions. They're asking questions like, in 5 years, where do you see yourself? What's your dream job? What's your dream as far as independence? Get the big picture and let them dream. We've all had dreams, and those dreams may or may not be realistic, but let's just get it out there, and then we can ask the next questions that help to narrow it down a little bit.
What I have found with certain of our kids is they can't really envision a future other than independence. That's the most they can think of. How do you get them to think in these bigger terms of, do you have to just ask them a lot of questions to break it down? And if they're overwhelmed with a lot of questions, do you break it into several sessions? Do I sound like I'm speaking from experience?
Well, this isn't something you want to beat them over the head with. So if you have what I suggest is that you have a specific day or maybe 2 days a week where you have that time where this is what we're going to talk about and work about on for the next half an hour or the next hour, whatever time span is going to work with your particular child and their focus and that kind of thing. And in the meantime, then they're going to have some goals and some things that they're thinking about and hopefully working on. The first book in the course that I've written is called Executive Function Practice. And the executive functions are things that most of our kids struggle with. And so we need them to continue to practice things like practice focusing, practice planning, practice, metacognition, all of those executive function skills. And in the booklet, there's exercises for doing that. And it's things they can do on their own. Some are just, like role-playing scenarios where if you were going to do this, next week, how would you plan for this project? Things like that. And so they're working on that. They're working on how to make a great impression is the next thing. They're working on understanding, looking at themselves and saying, what's my body language? What do people see when they see me? Or, what do people see when they see me? Just different things like that, which are all skills that sometimes don't come so easy to some of us and to our kids. So,
okay, good. That's helpful.
Yep.
And so you need, and then your next one, your step 2.
Yep. Step 2 is to set up a timeline. And this is where, once you've gone through the various, ideas. And sometimes our kids are very stubborn and they don't want to listen to how we tell them, well, let's break that down a little bit. No, I want this. This is all I want. So that's why it takes some time to get that vision. So once you've decided what that's going to be, then you talk about, okay, timeline. Do you think we can do this in 3 years, 5 years, 1 year? What does this look like for us? And once you break it down, then you have to start fitting in the things that that child's going to have to learn, whether that's functional life skills or it's, just specific things. I kind of break that down into 4 different categories, but I don't want to get ahead of myself.
So it's kind of like being a career counselor for your child.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's letting them make mistakes. When you're starting to work through different kinds of things and they insist that they can do this and you don't really think they can, let them try it. What if they fail? When we fail is how we learn. That's our biggest learning place. So let them fail. And there's always on the other side of that, what if they don't fail? What if they surprise the heck out of you and do a fantastic job at it? That's a possibility.
That's a risk. Yes, exactly.
But we've all taken risks. I mean, I'm sure you took some risks in, career building and everything else, and some worked out and some didn't work out. And that's where we learned.
I changed my major 5 times in college.
Well, there you go. So I changed mine 3 times.
Okay, so that's a good lesson for our kids. Is look at us as your examples, but it's okay to change their mind. It's because I think in some sense, learning never goes to waste.
No, it doesn't.
And even in my majors, I don't want to rattle them off, but even in my majors, I used one of which I completely flunked out of was computer science. That was back when it was like the thing. Everyone was majoring in it because it was brand new. And I ended up with a literary studies degree. And you would think those are exact opposites, but they're not, because what I ended up doing was I had taken enough computer classes to where I became a technical writer and doing documentation and training for an IT company, one of those big IT companies. And I was using my programming knowledge because I was actually a really good technical writer because I understood programming. I didn't just understand writing, I understood programming, and that made me a better technical writer. So nothing really ever goes to waste.
Right. And even when they're failing, they're learning something. And as they start to pick up some various skills and things, they're gaining things like pride, they're gaining some autonomy. That does so much for any young adult on any playing field in terms of, realizing what their potential is. So, I'm sure I held my kids back. And if my kids were listening, they'd probably say, "Oh, Mom, you didn't do this right." That's fine. They're functioning adults. So somehow we got there, right?
That's right. Probably through a lot of failure.
Yes, exactly.
On both sides.
That's right.
So were you going to go over more steps, or do you want to shift the conversation? It's up to you. Because you have how many steps total?
Well, there's 3 big steps. To cast the vision, determine your timing, get a timeline down. And then the next step is to prioritize, is to just sit down and say, what are your skills already? What are the things you need to learn? And that's where I was saying I divided them into 4 different sections. One is about personal care, how to take care of yourself, which includes things like hygiene, but it also includes things like what I referred to earlier, making a good first impression. You want to make a good first impression when you're going on a job interview. You want to make a good first impression when you're going on a first date. If you have, a girlfriend and you have to meet their parents, you want to make a good first impression. So that's something under personal care that I think is so important, is learning how we speak, our tone, our facial expressions, how all of those things are really saying, here I am. Excuse me. And then so after personal care, which I take as one of the first things.
I have a question about that, about the personal care one and the making the good impression. What happens if the child can't, or the young adult can't really see the impression they're making, even after it's been pointed out? What if they're not self-aware of what their impression is on others?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, I don't really have a specific answer to that. But that's where practice it takes time. If things didn't go well, you sit down, you say, okay, well, why do you think they didn't go well? Their first answer is going to be, well, I don't know. So then there's questions in the guide on making a first impression. Well, were you able to do this? Do you think you did this part well? Just kind of narrowing it into, well, what's the area that I need to work on? And
that's good. It's like, so you're working on self-awareness. You're working on self-awareness even before you're able to work on that. Sometimes you have to take a step back and work on a skill that's remedial to the ones that you want to work on.
Mm-hmm. For instance, making eye contact, you think, well, that's simple. Well, it's not simple when you're not used to looking at people and you look down all the time, and you have to consciously look the person you're talking to in the eye and talk to them engagingly like that. That's a skill that has to be learned for a lot of our kids. It just doesn't come naturally to a lot of people to do that. It feels like you're being too bold or whatever. So there's little things like that. And then you just continue to work on those skills while you move into the next section. The next section is social skills. So it's learning things about communication and when it's appropriate to interrupt and when it's not appropriate to interrupt. And if you have to interrupt, how do you do that? Just, little things, little nuances of social skills that, some of us just take for granted, but they're all things that at some point we had to learn how to do. And then those social skills go into, how do I act when I have to be in, working with a team, or how do I, do when I'm just one-on-one with someone, and how do I do when I'm in a very large group setting, and just kind of understanding and realizing that. And once those basic skills are mastered and you've worked through the personal skills, then we can go into two avenues. One would be if you think that this is the time to, get a job, that would be the next one that we would go through is job skills, how to interview, how to put together a resume, how to act on the job, what to do with your paycheck. All of those kinds of skills are important to know. The other avenue, if a job isn't really where you want to go yet, it would be the home skills, the school skills of home management, the taking care of my belongings, which actually starts in personal care, but how to take care of, bigger belongings, how to clean, how to organize, how to cook, how to shop, how to, do little maintenance, how to change a light bulb, how to, if the electricity isn't working, how to know what to do with a circuit box, that kind of thing. So those are the 4 different areas, that we're going to work through over the course of those 3 or 5 years. Or if your child already has, a lot of this, then it might be just 1 year to kind of brush up.
I like that, because when you first started talking about this, I thought all the things they have to learn. How far, thinking about, my daughter now, she's moderate special needs, so she would be independent at home. Just all the things, but you made it. It's nice that you said, okay, well, forget about all these other things you're going to have to work on, but just like, it's okay to just work on the personal skills, and mm-hmm. It's okay to just work on the communication skills and to build up to these other skills. So that gave me a big sigh of relief inside to know that I'm not going to have to do everything all at once, because that's what I tend to do. I'm like, just try to do everything, and it never works out.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind too, like you mentioned that your daughter is moderate, would most likely be independent at home. Her goal might just be, I want to make friends. I want to learn how to have connection. And so learning learning those social skills, learning those personal care skills so that she has, some idea of how to respond and act in different situations, will help her towards that goal of making friends or making connections or having a place where she belongs, that kind of thing, aside from just at home. So anyway, there's so many avenues you can go down with that casting a vision, kind of thing.
Oh, that's good. So it works for everybody, we're not just thinking jobs, we're thinking life.
Right. There's a very good possibility that some of our kids may not be able to hold a job to live on their own, but maybe there's a job that they can do on a volunteer basis that they've worked towards that so that they have something that they are proud of being a part of.
So we had a couple of questions come in from viewers. They have a chance to send questions in. So let me go ahead and ask you those. Lori G writes in, what is the age to still be considered a young adult?
I don't know that there's a hard and fast cutoff. I think that when we look at our kids, and we look at other young adults, probably in the mainstream of things, a young adult is probably between 18 and maybe 24, 25. Although that seems to be getting further down the spectrum because, kids are doing things very different than they did back in our day, where we finished college, got married, started a family. That's just not happening on the same kind of timeline that it did back then. But I would say we also have to take into consideration their emotional abilities and their mental maturity kinds of things. So a young adult could be 30, 31, 32, and just be on the young side of having those kinds of responsibilities. With that said, a 30-year-old should definitely be further along than a 21-year-old. But if they're not, they can start where they're at. I mean, that's the important thing to realize is you're never too far behind and you never know it all. There's always something else to learn. So while that maybe didn't answer the question, because I'm not going to give a specific age, it's not a one size fits all. If your child is in the older range, but still has a lot to learn, they are on the young side of what is expected from a responsible adult.
Maybe the flip side of that question would be, when is it too late to start something like this? And the reason I'm asking this is because I happen to know that Mary works with a program in another state, and they were working with kids in the age range that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. And they have decided it's a facility in Pennsylvania. And why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Okay,
explain
sure.
What the place is and what it does, and you can tell the name and all that, where it is. Yep. That's fine. But the question I was asking was, recently made a shift to working with younger kids, and so my question is the flip side of the one that Laura had asked, which is, when is it? Is there ever a time when it's not worth going through this process, if that's the right way to say it? Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about Hope Learning Center. It's a nonprofit up north of Philadelphia that my brother and his wife started. My nephew is on the autism spectrum. And so after having worked with him, and then my sister-in-law also was an aide in the public school system and had special needs aide. So she had kids that she followed through school with. They wanted to open up a facility for kids on the autism spectrum to learn skills towards independence, to find connection, make friends, and then the third one just went right out of my mind, but it'll come as I I chat. But anyway, so they started out with kids basically 21 and older. And I think the oldest that they had in the group was they're in their 30s. Actually, that's not true. They had one that was older than that. But what they found was that on the older side, the ones that were still living at home, but older adults, between where they were at and where their parents were at, it just didn't seem like they really wanted to move towards independence outside of the home. But they also found that there's a lot of skills that are missing from some of these older kids that really could be started to be taught at a younger age. So this year they're opening it up to middle schoolers. They're going down to 13-year-olds. And they're starting out with a social skills program. I actually wrote the curriculum for them. And so it's a 10-week program where they're going to be learning about social skills, and with the hope that when they complete that, then they would go into the next level of the program. But what they found is that the biggest thing that the kids and the young adults and adults have gotten from the program is the connection. They have a place where they belong. They've made friends that are like them. And so, they understand each other better. And it's really been a neat program to work with, and watch the different things. I go up and speak there on different topics pertaining to independence, and they do parent workshops as well, and it's just really interesting. So I think, to answer your question, when is it too late? I don't really think it's ever too late, because I think the one thing that, and you and I have talked about this, is we're not getting any younger, and as we get to a certain age. For me, it was when I turned 60, I was like, okay, my time is limited. Now, whatever that means, who knows? But when we have children at home still with special needs, we need to be thinking about what are we going to do, if something happens, or what will our child do when we're gone? And, for many of you, this might seem like a premature discussion, but it's really not, because we don't know, when we'll go. We don't know if something would happen that would make it even harder for us to help our young adults. And we're doing them a disservice if we're waiting to the last minute. One thing that our young adults that have these skills, that we're able to teach them these skills, is they will be better prepared to move into the next phase when we're no longer there to help them. Whether that's living with a sibling or going into a group home or whatever, we're giving them every advantage that we can possibly give them to be responsible adults.
I know that's a big motivator for me, for my daughter, because she just graduated high school. And so now we're looking at, we're facing that. We're staring that down.
Yeah.
We're staring down that road thinking, what can we work with her on that will give her maximum independence, being at home, and make it easy for the next caregiver, her next guardian, too, because she'll need guardianship. So that's a really big motivator. And I think when our kids are younger, especially when we're homeschooling them and we're all wrapped up in the academics and the state requirements, what's required of us to do all these things, what we end up doing is we kind of think, oh, we'll get to the life skills. We do the ones that are most urgent because they'll make our lives easier. But what you're saying is we really need to, especially the more severe their disabilities, the more likely it is we should be working on these things that you were talking about, which are the skills that will lead to their independence. And that's helpful to think about, because, of course, it's too late for me now. She just graduated, but she's still young, and we now have the world open to us. We can work on anything we want. We don't have to, have proof of progress for academics we can really work on those social skills. And I know most states have accommodations, not all, but most states have accommodations where if you have a special needs child, you can send in alternate forms of proof, and you can have an IEP or an SEP that shows what you're working on, things like that. But it's really hard to manage that, like, because for neurotypical kids or typical kids, they can their mirror neurons are working. And if they see you doing something, they can turn around and imitate it. And it's so much harder. I know Sue Patrick, who came up with the workbox system, I love this quote from her. It was in her materials that she sold with the system. And she said, our kids can learn anything, but they have to be taught everything. And I think that's where the struggle comes in for parents, is that having to teach everything. Like we were talking about earlier, you think about, oh, well, we're going to be teaching this. And it's like, well, no, we need to take a step back and teach a precursor skill to the one we really want to be working on. And that's what makes it so hard, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it sort of probably feels like, well, I thought we were talking about freedom, and instead you're telling me, oh, I got a full-time job teaching my kid these skills. And, that's where I want to encourage you. Yes, but it doesn't have to be a 24/7 kind of a teaching environment. It can be, Tuesday, Thursdays, or on Saturdays, we're going to do this together. Whatever you have planned for Saturdays, plan it to be something, whether it's cleaning or it's laundry or it's out in the garden or it's going shopping. Plan on it being something that you can do with them to help them to learn and make it as fun and as engaging as you can. Yeah, that takes a little bit more time. But the goal here is to give our children some independence, some maximum independence for them. And it will benefit them way more than it will benefit you temporarily. It just does. And as a mom, that's what you want to see in your child. You want to see them happy and thriving. And, once you start teaching, well, when we do A, then we can do B easier. And then C is right around the corner. And that gets things fired up in their heads with, well, if I sit on the couch all day, what am I going to have? Nothing. But if I get up and go and do this, I might have, that kind of a thing. And there's no reason, if we have, young adults at home that have even moderate abilities, there's no reason why we have to be the ones that are, of course we're serving them, but we don't have to do all of the cleaning and all of the cooking and all of the picking up. And, we don't have to do that. It empowers them to be a contributing member of the family, which then moves into being a contributing member of a community, which moves into being a contributing member of society. And so I just think those things are really important to think about.
That's really good. It's almost like you have to think of it as a 5-year transition to freedom for both parent and child.
Yeah, exactly.
So we had one more question from Kimberly T. And her question is, what is the best way to set realistic expectations for both my child and myself regarding what he or she can achieve?
I think that the best way to set realistic expectations is going to be to try. And if you have an expectation that's set and you're trying for it and it's just not happening, then step it back and see where you are and see what has to happen, at level A to get to level B. Things are always learned in a gradual progression. And that's going to be the same for your child. And those progressions may be a little bit longer than they are for, say, a typical sibling. But the best way is the old adage that my mother used to say to me is, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And who wants to hear that? None of us want to, but it really is the truth. If it doesn't work, then look at the situation and say, okay, what's one small change I can make that maybe will help this to be more successful the next time?
That's good.
And, your child may have no expectations, or they may have the sky's the limit expectations. And it's just all about finding that balance to what is it that can actually be accomplished. It may take a little longer than you think, or it may happen faster than you believe.
And if you've been homeschooling, you may have a pretty good idea of how much your child can achieve or how much you think they can achieve. But I would say assume competence, assume intelligence, assume they can do more than what you think. Because a lot of times the problem comes in motor planning. It's not that they can't think complex thoughts. They just can't motor plan what their answer is. And by motor plan, I mean answer a question correctly. Like they may struggle to process the thoughts coming out of their mouth, making those thoughts come out of their mouth when they actually have a perfectly formed thought in their head. They just can't say it, or can't say it under pressure if their fight or flight kicks in,
right?
And things like that. I forgot where I was going with that. Can you help me?
Well, I can't help you, but what I was thinking as you were saying that was there's always more than one way to do something also. So if the child is not able to express that, then let's look at it from a different way. And maybe their answer or their expression to that will kind of help us as the parent say, oh, I realize that what they really want to do is this, and that this is how they'll need to do it to begin with. So just being open, and homeschoolers, probably know this more than anybody else, is you adapt. You find the different ways to get to the point that you want to get to.
Go ahead. So I had a new question. So we kind of covered the steps to independence, planning for it. And you talked about the skills that are important for young adults to know. So how do you determine readiness to actually move out of the house? If that's their goal. If their goal is to be independent away from home, how do you know when they're ready? When it's time?
Well, I think that as parents, we don't ever think our child is going to be ready to actually do it. But there comes a time where you're going to have to say, I have taught them everything that they need to know. And so now it's time to give it a try. One thing that I suggested to a parent was, and this, may or may not work for everybody, but if you have in your area, there's so many, and this could sound crazy, but here I go. There are so many Airbnbs out there that why not rent an Airbnb that's just down the street for the weekend. Let your child go there and live by themselves for the weekend. Have them prepare for it by, choosing some recipes and, just have them as if they were living in an apartment or in a little house all by themselves. See how it goes the first time. If it was a total failure, then we may need to work a little harder back at home. But kind of give them, and you wouldn't do that. If you're on a 5-year plan, you wouldn't do that the first year. You would do that, the 4th year or 4.5 years into it. Let's just try this. Or, go with them, plan a week-long vacation where they take on most of the responsibility, and go somewhere and just let them go for it. But I think really with readiness, I think as parents, we know when our child has the skills. The next step is just letting them fly, see what happens. Maybe that's not a really profound answer, but I certainly wasn't ready for my kids to go off to college, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is not going to work for either of us. They survived. I wasn't ready for my kids to go live on their own, but they did it and they survived. So anyway.
Yes, I can relate to that. And that is a cool idea about the Airbnb, because we have one that's kind of like out in the country close to us. And that would be perfect. And I like the idea or just having them do all the planning, do all the meal prep. Basically they're serving you instead of you serving them all the time.
Yeah.
see.
And they're proving to you that they have actually learned these skills. Because, let's face it, a lot of them are going to, if you say, hey, would you please plan dinner for tomorrow night? Probably their first reaction is, why? I don't want to. But anyway, that's how they're proving that they've got it ready. And most of them, if the motivation is to be out on their own, they're going to prove to you that they can do it.
Okay, and then I have one last question, and this is probably the biggest one of all. What happens? What are the blind spots of parents trying to let their kids go? Like, what problems do you find with the parents? Because we've talked a lot about, the struggles the kids have. What are the struggles you're seeing with the parents and them being able to let go? And what would you tell them?
I would say it's a mindset. It's a mindset issue. We want to be super protective of our kids, and we're afraid of failure. We're afraid of embarrassment. We're afraid of, a number of different things. And really, what it comes right down to is learning how to phrase it in a positive way and to go for it that way. The simplest one is the what if they fail? And the saying goes, what if they fail? But what if they fly? What if they succeed? Think of what that's going to do for them and for you. Another one that I have used when I have a booklet that's called The Empty Nester Blues. The not so empty nester blues, I'm sorry, because we don't have empty nests because we have young adults at home. And sometimes we get to the point where we say, I'm so tired of parenting. Or we say things like, well, that might work for your child, but it's never going to work for my child. How do you take those phrases and flip it around? And again, that's a mindset thing. But one of the other ones that we talk about in one of my seminars is, are you a dream squasher? Does your child have a dream that they really want to see come to fruition, and you're just squashing that dream and you're saying, no, I just don't think you can? Why be a dream squasher? Let's be their cheerleader instead and say, okay, if that's what you're after, you tell me, how are you going to get there? What can I do to help? And let me be your supporter, standing by your side, ready to help. But this one's on you. And I think that any young adult that wants something bad enough is going to figure out how they're going to be able to get that. So that would probably be the one thing that, with the whole just flip the narrative is, don't be a dream squasher, be a cheerleader, and help your kid get to where they want to go. Wow.
Very convicting. I was like, oh, stab to the heart. Because I've probably done that with, in particular, one child. I'm the dream squasher.
One of the seminars that I did on that topic, after when I opened it up for questions, I had a dad stand up and say, I never thought of it that way, but I am a dream squasher. My child is asking me for this, and I'm telling him, no. When really all I have to do is say, okay, let's go for it, and let him do the work. So anyway.
That's excellent. I think that's a great way to end this, because it puts it back on us to be there for our kids and to be that encourager, trust God for, our kids' future, because we aren't going to be here forever. He loves them more than we do. So we can put, it's really not about us. It's about the kids. And that's hard to, after so many years of doing all the things to help your child as much as possible, now it's time to do all the things to let them go. Yeah. And that makes it really hard. So tell us about the resources. I know you held up a book earlier. Tell me about all the resources you have and where people can find them.
Okay. Well, if you go to my website, which again is whatemptynest.com, you will see links to a couple of things. The first thing is the free guide that I had showed you, which is called Do You Dream of Independence? And it's just a small couple sheets of paper guide, but it will start you on the journey of thinking things out. It'll have the questions that both parent and young adult are going to need to answer as they get on this journey. And then the next thing that is available to you is what I was just referencing about the not so empty nester blues. When we've come to the point where I just don't want to do this anymore, how to change our mindset, how to flip the narrative so that we are empowering our young adult to get the job done, and being their supporter, being their cheerleader. We're not leaving them to do this on their own, but we're also not doing it for them. And then the other thing that's on there, and it's on sale right now, is the toolkit. It's an assessment toolkit. It's called Exploring Independence. It's the first phase of the program that my website offers. It's basically, are you ready? And it has parent guide. It has questions. It has the 3 things that we know that our child is actually ready to move forward towards independence. And it has, assessments. It has some assessments that both you and your child can go through. And then it has the first book, the Executive Function Practice book that I talked about. That's also in that toolkit. And then from there, Navigating Independence is phase 1, and that is the curriculum that has 14 books on functional life skills, and that's what's available to you right now.
Great. The thing I like about I've seen some of your things. The thing I like about them is you address both the parent and the young adult. It's not all on the parent, and it's not all on the child. There's a good balance between that. So that is it for today. Our next episode of Empowering Homeschool Conversations it's in 2 weeks. I'm hosting Lori Chuba, and it's going to be tailoring success, crafting effective educational therapy for homeschool students. And that's about using frequency, intensity, and duration in therapy and in education to get better results. So until then, take care, God bless, and we will see you then.
I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
I found myself on a ledge, 3 stories high at some condominiums, contemplating my life and struggling to understand my purpose. Have you ever found yourself on the ledge? My name is Billy Yancey. I'm a caring father, mentor, and friend. In my new podcast, Billy and the Goat, I share the life-changing events that shaped who I am today to remind you that no matter how far you've fallen, God can help you get up and thrive. Listen now at lifeaudio.com.